Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Real Talk with Eddy, where we discuss about real issues with real voices. Basically, what we do is we break through the political spin with whatever's going on in terms of news and business fluff to bring you honest conversations about politics, business, film, and even life. I'm your host, Eddy, and I'm a political strategist, entrepreneur, and a filmmaker. With me today, we've got, once again, David Bruno, who's a cybersecurity policy expert. How you doing, David?
Doing well. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here as usual.
Okay. Well, the pleasure is all mine to have you. On May 27th, what happened? Yesterday, we had the head of state of Canada visiting us, King Charles came along, and it was quite a symbolic moment in Canadian history. In fact, it's very rare that a monarch visits Canada and also gives a throne speech, right? We had King Charles, who became a monarch. He was the oldest heir in British history, in fact. He visited Canada at the invitation of our Prime Minister, Mark Carney. One of the main reasons he was there is obviously the Prime Minister invited him to. And it's usually very common for the head of state, the British monarch, to sort of be apolitical as a typical figurehead. In fact, his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, was very much apolitical. She rarely voiced her stance on things or whether or not she likes or dislikes the prime minister in question, so on and so forth. And no, I'm not basing that off the show The Crown either. But in that, you can even see it, right? So King Charles has always been, unlike his predecessor, someone who is not afraid to voice his opinion, and you can judge his stances on issues by his actions, mainly with his charity work and foundations. So he actually wanted to go into acting. A little bit of background about him, and obviously he was a prince, so he could not.
Yeah, I did know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So no, that part about the crown is true, and he did pursue theater a lot in university.
Right.
But enough about acting. Let's talk about this throne speech, which was about 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
And basically, after we just had our election with a liberal minority, with Mark Carney as our prime minister, he basically opened up the 45th Parliament.
Right.
It's tradition in Canada that usually the head of state, and usually it's not the king or queen. It is usually the crown's representative, shall we say, the governor general, who opens with a throne speech.
Yes.
This time it was the monarch himself.
Yes.
So, what are your 2 cents about what occurred and what it actually means as a historic moment for Canadians and for you, David?
Well, I first of all, I think you got it right. I mean, it is very rare to have the head of state, our head of state, whose main residence is in the UK, to have a visit to Canada to open Parliament. We haven't seen that since 77, and before that it was 62, I believe it was.
1977, actually.
1977 was the last
time.
one. That's correct.
Yeah.
And then from there, for me, it is quite a no-brainer. And I've often asked the question why the Prime Minister hasn't done this previously. And in fact, throughout our history, we've had princes that were governor generals up until Madame Sauvé, I think it was. And after that, we never had anybody from the royal family. So, it's been a long time coming, and it's rather something that was a bit of a treat, actually, if you want to look at it from another point of view, as he is not only the head of state, but he's also commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So that, from time to time, these are the things that these cohesive things are very important to stand out. Now, I know that in the last several years, going back, I would say I've given it a good 50 years, we've put a lot of emphasis on our natural-born governor generals. I understand that entirely, and they are the representative of the monarch. But in these unprecedented time, as you know from I mean, from what's going on. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that Carney had this connection with the household himself. His brother working in Kensington Palace, and he thought this is the best time ever to get the king to come over. And I hope we get more of these instances. The speech from the throne for me represents everything that makes us different in North America. And there's no denying it. I mean, that's part of our history, and a lot of people don't really understand that. And unless it's put into your face, no one's going to care. So I'd go back to the teachings of Machiavelli. Machiavelli said quite plainly 500 years ago, if you don't live in the territory you conquer, you're destined to lose it. I'm not necessarily saying we're going to get rid of the monarchy, because that in Canada is relatively impossible, but it is important to be seen. So yeah, this was incredibly important.
One of my favorite lines of King Charles actually was, "The true North is indeed strong and free." As senators and former and current prime minister were applauding to that line. I mean, we've always been strong and free, in my view, technically. But one of the things that's really remarkable is we haven't really needed the monarch's quote unquote intervention
It's a good way of
eh,
putting it.
or consultation, to be honest, ever since 1931 for the Statute of Westminster,
Okay.
and also 1982. But that's basically Prime Minister Trudeau Sr. had to go himself to England to get the Constitution's ratification concluded.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, 1977 was the last time a monarch did speak at a throne room speech. And this was a particular stab to Donald Trump, to give it the signal that we are indeed not at all alone, as he put it. And you notice that King Charles, almost every single sentence was carefully crafted so that it's a direct or indirect stab at Donald Trump. And I'm wondering if it was a good move, or if it
Well,
was too much rattling the cage, so to speak, in
absolutely
terms
not.
of Donald Trump's tariffs attempts and also 51st state attempts
Well,
to purchase Canada or whatnot.
it goes even beyond that. I mean, I would say that there's a threefold to this one. An unprecedented attack on sovereignty. Even if it's a joke, it's not a joke. Secondly, I think this was also a jab at the Prime Minister of the UK, at Stammer. I mean, what do you think you're doing? You're opening. I mean, he's our this, in light of how it went down, was actually an assertion of sovereignty, not just for the United States, but also to the UK. He's not the emperor of the empire any longer. He is now King of Canada, separate to that of the UK. Deal with it. And the second one is, or the third one, I should say, is a presentation to Canadians who don't actually think this is important, to open their eyes to how the system works. Now, you may or may not have an opinion on the monarchy, or sorry, of the royal family. I don't care. But if you look at it from an institutional point of view, the crown is the cork in our bottle. It's the top of the institution. When you look at how you look at the American government, you will find that as they're divvied up into the three branches that have checks and balances, what they try to do on paper, which doesn't actually work. In Canada, if you look at the Westminster system, you'll find very clearly every level of government has a boss, every one of them. So the Prime Minister has a boss, the Governor General. The Governor General's got a boss, it's the King. And without the King's signature, nothing's going to get passed. So uh, there is mechanisms in Canada that people should be aware of that are completely separate from the United States. And if it wasn't for the King's visit, we wouldn't be talking about it. So again, I think there was more than just one aspect to it. There was a threefold. And I was very appreciative of it.
Now, in terms of sovereignty, since that's also something that the king referred to, strong and free, um, look, I mean, we've always had sovereignty. We've always had our
True.
territories, like ever since the creation of the Confederation, so to speak. So, 1931, the Statute of Westminster gave Canada the opportunity
Yeah.
to independently not just engage in peace talks,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Because keep in mind, the monarch still has, well, still is the commander in chief of our military, right?
Right.
But
Absolutely.
also, the Statute of Westminster gave us the opportunity historically to
Hmm.
engage in trade agreements. And speaking of trade, that's another thing that Trump has rattled with the tariffs, the total global economic scene,
Hmm.
rather.
Yep.
So, what's very interesting is while we had a visit from our head of state
Hmm.
in the United States, President Donald Trump, it was Memorial Day for Americans.
On Monday. That's correct. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so he took the opportunity instead of honoring the fallen to actually take a jab at his opponents. Even Pete
And what
Buttigieg,
you're referring to
he
the speech
seems to
at
be
West
obsessed
Point.
by Pete Buttigieg suddenly because he's afraid he's going to run for president. I still think Secretary Buttigieg is going to run. He's in Iowa for a few days,
Hmm.
but we're not going to talk about the American election at the moment because we're talking about our current situation at home. So there was polling done during the 2021 election, which asked Canadians, "Are you for abolishing the monarchy?" And only 40% were for it.
Hmm.
Though it's not a huge majority, it's still a significant minority in this country.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the threat of Trump united the country in a way that people forgot about their desires, if they were indeed for it, to abolish the monarchy right now?
Oh,
And why do you think that might be?
I wouldn't mix the two together. I mean,
Hmm.
I would like to say that we've never been better galvanized to actually look and see why our system is different, how it's different, and why we even have a monarchy to begin with, because people just don't understand it. So, if it wasn't for Trump, I don't think we would have been in this situation where Canadians have, for the first time in my lifetime, looked inward so much, and with that expression comes, why are we a constitutional monarchy? Who is the monarch to us? And it opened up a new conversation that I haven't seen even while I was studying in political science at Lakehead University so many years ago. But it's wonderful. I mean, I'm I'm sorry to see that it took an existential threat like the president of the United States to bring
Whoever
us
thought, eh?
together and ask these fundamental questions. And then second to that, when you bring up the question back in 2021, if we would get rid of the monarchy, it is a mute question. And I I shudder to think that when we ask these questions to Canadians, if they understand the complexity of actually getting rid of the monarchy, and clearly they do not. So that question in itself is, I think it's it's not a Pandora's box, but it certainly is a can of worms. Because when you open it up and people find, let's say that we hit that 50+1 threshold, then the next question is, well, what do you do with it? Are we going to get rid of the monarchy and replace it with what? Secondly, have you looked at the formula recently of how to get rid of the monarchy? Good luck. So if that has opened up a question of conversation, then kudos to them.
Well, look, I mean, I think just like electoral reform, right? I think
Oh yeah, good luck with that one.
Well, I think it's much more doable. And
Fair enough.
despite what the formula might be, the formula wouldn't be to abolish the monarchy. If you're talking about the unanimous amendment formula of the Canadian Constitution of 1982 or the
One
750 rule,
100%.
where you need at least 50% of said population of at least 7 provinces to agree to it. So that's a 750 rule. That's a second method in which
Hmm.
a constitutional change can happen. But
Right.
abolishing the monarchy is a different story. In fact, Australia even tried it in 1999, I believe.
But they don't have the same rule as we have for the abolishment of the monarchy in
No, no, but they
particular.
are a constitutional monarchy
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
Very similarly, we're both countries. They are both countries that are part of the Commonwealth. Very similar,
Oh, yes.
in terms of the legislative process as well. But I don't think. Look, people want something till they don't, right? Because they realize it's so much not worth the effort, right? At the end of the day. So, and things always are ephemeral, I believe. So
I'm going to go
remember,
further to that
this
one though.
reminds me. Yeah, yeah, just a second. This actually reminds me of the 2015 election, when Stephen Harper was running again and Tom Mulcair was leading in the polls. And what was the top issue back then? It was literally about constitutional amendments, but more specifically about the Senate, getting rid of the
Oh
Senate,
yes, thank you. The Tripoli Senate and the absolute
right?
nonsense that
So
came with it.
so getting rid of the Senate would actually require the unanimous constitutional amendment formula, or the 750 rule, to be applicable, assuming that even the Senate agrees, and then you have to go get the Governor General to sign off
Correct.
once there's the votes. 2015, it was abolishing the Senate, whereas the conservatives under Harper
Yeah.
wanted to have elections for senators, and that issue quickly went away after the expense scandals went away,
Right.
and people just went on with whatever they have to do in life. So the reason I bring that up is because anything too grandiose seems too not to say undoable, but
Mm.
it seems too much even for legislators to make that their primary campaign issue, and I think that's where they
Yeah.
fall. So I think the abolishment of the monarchy should not be an option in the near future,
Hmm.
because what's the alternative? Should we have a republic like the Americans?
100%.
Well, they're struggling with their electoral vote system, and it's, you can argue that it's not at all proportional or representative compared to us. And if you want longer lineups during an election, just go with the American system, because their ballot's like 4 pages long. So,
Yeah.
um, there's pros and cons, right? But
The-
there's more cons for our American.
and
It's a
I'm
good thing
glad.
that it took us 100 years to actually, for our founding fathers, to look at the Americans and then write our own version,
Oh,
right?
but
Like
wait,
John
there's
A.
more.
McDonald.
If you look at the Tripoli Senate and remember how vague and veiled that argument was from that point of view, especially from Stephen Harper, all we had to
Hmm.
do was look at the example that Australia has given us, where they gave powers to or not powers, I should say, to allow in the creation of their parliament, as Westminster as Canada's is as well, but they allowed senators to be voted. Now, what was the effect of that? Well, they gave both chambers the same amount of powers because they didn't exactly limit what chamber was going to have what power explicitly in the Constitution. So in 1975, I think it was, when the House of Commons was voted into one party and the Senate was voted into another, they had passed a bill in the House of Commons that should have gone into the Senate for review and so on and so forth, but it was turned down. And so that what it actually initiated was a non-confidence vote. Well, that's not right. So you have the Senate, which voted non-confidence for the House of Commons, and they weren't supposed to be compatible, and it brought down the House. So in that example, even Australians had said, well, we better not do that again. And so when Stephen Harper had brought up a Tripoli Senate, what for? There was such an easier way of reforming the Senate that it took Trudeau Jr. to actually implement it, where he kicked everybody out of the party system. Absolutely brilliant. It fixed the system. There are things that could be better of it, but it did eliminate that conversation from the get go.
Uh, just to and intervene on that point, just a correction to be made. Yes, Trudeau Jr. did kick out, and it's in loose quotation marks, but they then created their own party. The Senate Liberals is what they call themselves, right?
No,
So,
actually, there's more than they're not the
so
Senate Liberals. There's more than that, though.
no, they became like a clique culture, kind of like high school.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, the independence of the Senate, it's, I actually like what was done in 2015 and so on. There's a commissioner that is supposed to, in theory, be the one to deal with the selection process. But I actually wouldn't mind having elected senators as well, if we choose to keep the Senate. I mean, at the moment we do, but back in 2015, let's just assume for somehow in a different reality,
Mm,
in the multiverse, right? If you're a Marvel fan, you'll appreciate that reference.
sure.
Um, so let's assume the NDP had won.
You still haven't answered the question about how you would do it. What's
I
the
would
first step in the process of getting rid of the Senate?
The first step is to get a mandate from the Canadian people in
What
October.
does that mean? Just win the election?
It means putting it on the table, front and center, as part of our offer to Canadians. If you vote for the NDP, you will have a government that will make it a priority to get rid of the undemocratic, unaccountable Senate. That'll be part of what we're offering Canadians.
Then what do you do?
Sit down with the provinces, like I've been doing for several years now.
They just magically, the Queen agreed, and there's no more Senate. Kind of like Quebec, actually. Quebec and I think Manitoba are the provinces that don't have the Senate, the upper body of the legislative
No, actually,
bodies.
I believe all the provincial legislatures no longer have an upper house. But I'm going to counter you. I'm going to say that I don't want the Senate to be elected. I would rather it be a position that you apply for. And those that have the right category of merit should have the job. I don't want an elected Senate because I know exactly what's going to happen.
These are the backbenchers of the party, though.
Fine. Let them apply. Whoever has the credentials, who cares where they come from or what background?
Interestingly enough, about the Senate, you have to be, actually it's easier in terms of qualifications according to the Constitution. You have to be at least 35 years old and have $4,000 in valued assets, right?
Correct.
Those are two of the four criteria. But enough about that. We were talking about the King's visit.
Yes.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, we're going to talk about on the Quebec side of the Liberal leadership race after this break.